Hey guys, so I'm going to start my question and answer video. I know it's been very anticipated. A lot of you just asked me great questions and I was like overwhelmed because I didn't expect to get so many. That's why I did a separate video. So I'm going to give you a few updates before we start the video. It's going to be very quick and then we'll get right to your questions. One is if you've placed an order with me in the last week or two, everything's going to be delayed just a couple of days to maybe like a week after when it normally ships. I'm just kind of going through some personal stuff right now. I have a family member that is very sick, so that's really the only reason why anything will be delayed. But after this week, everything will kind of settle out because, we're just adjusting to a new schedule, and I hope that you understand. I try to film on days that I'm in a great mood and that I'm really in the mood to film. I don't like to force filming because I feel like that will translate onto camera, and I like to bring a very positive atmosphere to this channel, so I hope you guys understand. Everybody's got, shit that they deal with, and so do I, so just sharing that with you. So if anybody did order stuff and you watch my vlogs, you kind of know what's going on. So let's skip forward and let's talk about what's next in the queue for videos. The videos are going to go this video up, then my TFlux, which will be a review, then another studio vlog, which I am currently filming. So you guys have a lot of content coming to this channel very soon. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to read off questions. I have my computer in front of me, and I'm going to try not to butcher anybody's name, so forgive me if I do, and we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. I don't know how many I'll be able to get through on one video, but I will try to answer everybody's as best as possible. So Emily asks, thank you, Mitch. Thank you for this, Mitch. So I've gotten so many great tips from you, doll. My bezel definitely needs to be 24 or 26 gauge for sure. 28 gauge is way too flimsy for me. I agree, I don't like 28 gauge at all. My question seems silly, but my seams are still not completely accurate before soldering, especially bezel seams. The light shines through slightly. Any other tips for me? Thank you. Well, thank you for your question. I think that with filing, there's no really quick and dirty way to do it. There are little tips and tricks you can learn along the way, and I think I might just have to show you guys like kind of what I do. I've shown it in my bezel setting tutorial, and it's angling the file a certain way, because sometimes instead of like having the metal flat, I'm just going to use my finger to show this, like having the metal flat after you file, sometimes you'll notice like one side's a little bit angled, and that's because you put pressure in different places with your hand, and unfortunately we're always a little bit heavy-handed on one side, so you'll get crooked bezels instead of being straight, or seams I should say. So, it's really just comes with practice and time. You want to file with intent. That's what I always say. That's what I was taught. When you really think about how you want to angle your file and where the piece is on your bench pin and how you're positioning yourself, those things are really going to help you. But like anything, especially jewelry or any kind of crafting or making something, in time, things come easier and faster and come out better. You're still seeing light. I still see light sometimes, and I have to fix it. So don't just step ahead, don't just rush ahead and just solder it anyways, because you're going to have a problem at the later stages of cleaning. Definitely sit down, buy some really cheap copper bezel wire. I have this copper bezel wire, which is a lot cheaper, and you could practice on this and you're not going to waste your money as much, and just, get cheaper bezel wire. If I have the link to the seller, I will link it below. And like I said, just practice, practice, practice. I know that you probably want like a quick and dirty method, but that's really the best thing I can say is just to practice. One other trick that I had seen in a video, because, I do video tutorials. I watch video tutorials as well, and I buy, video tutorials to learn different skills. This guy used like a sanding disc like this, and basically pressed the bezel to the edge of it and had this spinning in his flex shaft, so it would kind of get it all even, but wasn't a huge fan of that. Might work for you. I might try that again. Maybe it's something we can kind of test out together. But that's something that you could try. A lot of the times we're trying to close up these seams and we're filing, and although we think we're filing straight, we still tend to be heavy-handed on one side or another. So when I try to file, I kind of go on an angle. So instead of just filing straight and flat, I do that first, and then I kind of also hit the edge, just like this. I just angle the file a little bit, because there's always a little lip right there that tends to
not get filed properly just because of the way we're angling. And I mean, if you're angling straight correctly, you're not going to have the problem. But still, if you're noticing that maybe instead of your edges being flat like this, they're kind of like that, you'll see it. It's just something you have to look at when the wire is on its side like this. It's going to be very hard to tell on the camera, but if you're looking at this very end of the point, it should be completely flat. Flat. If you're seeing it kind of, instead of it being like this, you kind of see like that, that's why I angle the file, if that makes sense. It's a little bit hard to explain. I'm really doing the best I can, but that's one tip, is kind of just angling your file this way along with going straight, and then also this. But filing with intent. Really use your bench pin, you know, and sit there and make cuts that make sense. You know, don't just sloppily file it. Well, I hope I get the right one. You know, you really want to sit there and say, okay, give it a nice pull. Nice one swift pull. You're going to have to use your imaginations just a little bit. But if we can pretend that this is a flat sanding disc like I showed before in my vlog, or not my vlog, in the Q&A, you would want to touch the edge of the bezel to the top of your sanding disc like so. Can you see that? So that essentially should give you a very flat edge. This actually worked pretty well because this is still a disc that does cut, but this is really, you'd really want to use a sanding disc. So you use both edges, and essentially this should create a perfect seam. I don't really find that it does so much. I mean, it works. I don't know. I think I have to play around with it a little bit more, but that is an option. And I think if you have the proper sanding discs at the right grit, you will get the results that you're looking for.
Okay, my next question comes from Aisha. I think that's how we say it. Either Aisha or Aisha. Hi, I would really like to hear about your marketing practices. How did you get people to start noticing your work? Thank you so much for asking and sharing. I love how down to earth you are. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really tried to be myself on camera. When I first started filming, it wasn't as easy because you're like uncomfortable, but I like to think that I bring you guys as much of myself as I can. So to answer your question, my marketing practices now aren't very different from what I started, but I'm definitely very consistent. It's something that is really going to get you far. So that's number one, is be consistent. Number two is try a few avenues. Don't go on Pinterest, Tumblr, Facebook, what else is there? YouTube, you know, mass mailings. Like, pick a couple to start with, see how they respond, how they react, see if what you're putting up is responding, and then you can tweak and change things from there. But I really love Instagram. One, I think, is a very obvious reason. You can reach so many people so instantly, and it's all through photography. So if your photography is not the best, maybe it's not the best avenue, but photography will grow as you grow. So I love Instagram. Brings a lot of business and just a lot of community support, so I like that. The second one I love is Tumblr. Tumblr is something that you can post a photo and it can be shared thousands and thousands of times. Not every photo will be.
Okay, so this is a look at my Tumblr, and as you can see, I have a very plain, minimalistic design, which is kind of my thing. But you can see you can scroll through my profile, and as you post photos, these are going to come up in your followers' feed. So they can reblog your photo, they can favorite your photo, and as you can see, I think this was shared like 30 something times. I can't read it from my screen right now. But if I go ahead and I click on the photo, or a customer or a follower clicks on the photo, it's going to redirect them wherever I tell them to. So it'll redirect to my website. You can also put to a particular link for, like, let's say that piece was for sale, but that wasn't. So anyways, this is an archive. So as you can see, like, some of them are only shared 8 times, 2 times, no times, and others just hit it off. You have to use hashtags. That's how you get your stuff found and reblogged, and it's really a great tool, which we'll go into on maybe another video.
Some photos get shared more than others, and you can directly link that photo that you post back to your shop or website. So it can be unlimited amount of traffic, which is amazing. And I love Tumblr. I don't hear a lot about it all the time, but it's a really great tool. What else? I love my YouTube channel, obviously, for many reasons, and I'll get into that later. But what else? And my Facebook fan page. I do pay to boost my posts because, to be honest with you, most people really don't see all of your posts unless you're boosting them. I'm sure if you maybe had, I know some people don't, but for me, I have to boost them for them to be seen. You know, Facebook changed their guidelines a long time ago that, you know, you used to be able to post a photo and anybody that liked your page would automatically see it.
Okay, so this is a good example. I've never liked Squarespace before, and if we click over the like button on any page and you hover over, they give you options. This is usually something people bypass, and you can unlike the page, you can click posts in the news feed or notifications. These are kind of just controlling what you're going to be viewing from the page in your timeline. So as you can see, automatically they're going to choose unfollow for you, meaning you're not going to see any of the posts from the page you just liked. And then there is also default, which is I think you see a few posts, and then you can also see it first, which means you'll get notified right away. So as you can see, there's a couple of options. And if you go over to the left-hand side, you can now choose the type of notifications you're going to get from that page, which varies with you can just see videos if you want to just see their photos, links, or events that they share. So Facebook really sets you up in the sense that when you go to like a page, you're not automatically going to see the content that the page is trying to promote. When I boost a post, I am now getting about 300 likes on this one, depending on how much you're going to spend, how many people you have, and want to target. And I'm getting a ton of comments, so I get to interact with people, and about 24, 25 shares on one photo. So boosting your page is a really great tool to promoting your work while you're trying to grow your business. And it's really the only way that a lot of your followers are going to actually see your content. So I hope that this helped a little bit, and we can definitely go into a further video at some point.
So I love Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, my YouTube. If you like to write, then do a blog. You know, like you have to find your avenue that you love, and I would really have to say just stick with it and be consistent. And if you're going to be doing a lot of photography advertising, you want to be consistent. You want to have, you know, someone that recognizes your style through your photographing, or your photography, I should say. And if you like, you know, model shots and very street chic kind of stylized shoots, you can do that. If you like nature and you like the leaves and the wood like I do, you can do that. If you like very crisp white backgrounds, whatever it is, you have to find kind of your voice within, you know, your product and your photography to better market yourself. So I hope that helped. Now, Paul asks a similar question. He says, still loving the videos. I have started taking classes and I'm loving it due to your vlogs. A question I have is how you got your product out there in the beginning. Was it hard to get started? Much love from Australia. Oh, I would love to go to Australia. This kind of ties into the last question. Yes, it is difficult. You know, it takes time to gain traction. Now, some people just blow up and burn out and go. I guess you wouldn't be burning out. You would just be blowing up and you would just be taking off and you go. And that's really great. I mean, I wish that I could like just have like a 70,000 followers within like a year or two, but it just doesn't always happen like that for everybody. I think if you're really savvy with marketing, you can really, really achieve that very quickly. Marketing is something I'm learning. It's not something I specialized in. I specialize in a little bit of everything. I specialize in making the product, you know, but not necessarily marketing the product. I think I do a pretty good job, I'd like to think, but I'm not an expert by any means. So it is hard, but I think if you're, like I said, consistency, that's all it is. And writing down your results and writing down what you want to do and having a plan and sticking with it. Plans will get you far. Okay, so Gabby Flying Chef asks a few questions. Info on hybrid soldering, gold on silver, more detail. Thank you, seriously, thank you. Well, you're very welcome, Gabby. You know, gold on silver, I don't do a ton of gold work and I don't do a ton of hybrid soldering, but for the times that I've done it, it depends on what your issue is. If you're worried about an actual flowing issue, you have to remember they have two very different flowing points. They're not very different, but they're different. And like when I'm doing a gold bezel and a silver back plate, I really try to focus the heat on the silver back plate and then wisp it over the gold.
Okay, so here I'm going to show you how to solder a 14 karat 26 gauge bezel wall to a 20 gauge sterling silver back plate. Now the 14 karat bezel was soldered closed with 14 karat gold solder. Depending on where you buy your solder from and what kind of gold solder, it will vary with flowing points, but Generally, this one flows, the gold hard solder for the bezel will flow at 1460, and this is the gold solder that I use. Now, silver hard solder flows at 1490, so it's a little bit higher, but our next step for mixed metal fabrication is to solder the gold to silver using a medium silver solder. So we used a 14 karat gold hard solder for the bezel. Now we're going to use a sterling silver, or I should say silver solder in medium, which the medium has a flow point of 1295. So essentially, when we're trying to flow the mixed metal piece, the medium solder that we're using in silver with the flow temp of 1295 should not melt at any point the gold hard original solder on the bezel, which is 1460. So concentrate a lot of that heat onto your silver backplate, and you can just kind of wisp your flame on top of the gold bezel. As we know, bezels are a little bit more delicate, they're a little bit thinner, so you're going to want to just take precaution. But as you can see in the video, we're just applying heat like we do with any other bezel, and it's just about to flow. And that's pretty much that. We'll go into more detail as I do more work with gold and silver, and I would definitely like to share as much knowledge, but like I said, I don't really claim to know everything. I'm just kind of showing you what I do work with most often.
If you're nervous about like unsoldering maybe your first seam, then use like a yellow ochre, or you can use, I think, whiteout, somebody had mentioned in one of my videos, or you can use like a heat shield if you're worried about that and you don't want to ruin your project if it's like a couple of solder steps. The next question is, tell us how you learned your schooling, classes, etc. Schooling and classes. So I am not trained through like a bachelor's program at an art school or anything like that, or an art institute. I actually just took local classes at an art league, and I did it for about 2 to 3 years, and I'd go like once, twice a week, and I went in there knowing what I wanted to learn. There was no curriculum, which I think is to the students' disadvantage personally, because I think a curriculum helps when you're just doing like filing all one week and then sewing the next week and then soldering, and you learn in layers. But I kind of wanted to just do what I wanted to do. I watched so many videos, read so many articles. I had a very good idea of how to do it. I just needed the tools to do it. Find a local school in your area. It doesn't have to be the GIA school. You can go to so many different workshops. They come to every major city. So even if you live in bumblefuck America, you can definitely find a place. You just might have to travel a little bit. I'm lucky I live in New York. We have a lot of different like classes that go on around here. We also have the city that's right here. So I can really take advantage of the classes that come through here in New York. But every major city, whether you're in Seattle or whether you're in Kentucky, I know that everywhere offers something, and I know it's harder for some and it's an expense. But if you're really interested in learning, I recommend taking classes. But for me, I just did classes for a couple of years, and I learned more on my own, I'd have to say, than I did in the actual studio time, because it wasn't like it was 5 days a week. Then I ended up hiring one of the teachers at the school privately, and we get along really great. I don't see him a lot now because I've been busy and I'm also trying to save money. Private tutoring is very expensive. The guy is so worth it. My teacher Peter is wonderful, and I plan on using him more in the new year because I have some stuff that I want to kind of start doing. I've been putting off like gypsy setting and prong setting and more wax carving. So that's how I pretty much learned, but a lot of it is right here in my studio, just kind of, watching different videos and reading magazines and reading books. And that's really, being self-taught isn't a bad thing, but you definitely need some extra guidance along the way, because you'll get different techniques and tips and things that you're doing wrong. And I'm sure there's things that I do wrong still, but you get the job done. So how do you do your pricing? Cost of materials, your time, minimum wage, never, or what times to, then wholesale help. I don't even know if I read that right, but she's basically asking, how do I price out my jobs? So the way that I do it, and everybody is different, with pricing, I notice a lot of people underprice. There's a great book, and I forget the name of it right now, but I'm going to put it on the screen, and I'll also link it below. So I'm just checking my time to see how much I have on my memory card. I think it says you have to sell like, I don't know, $2 million in sales in order to make like X amount, to really make a living and have like a house and like a really comfortable life. You have to sell a lot, and if you're pricing $20, $40, you're never going to make a lot of money. I mean, unless you can do so much volume and you have people working for you and production systems in place, but most of us don't. So I recommend that you I take my cost, and this can vary. I'm just going to give you like a really rough example. You take the cost and then you times that by anywhere. I like to stay between 2 to 4, because the inflation on jewelry can be anywhere from like 100 to 400%. So I usually try to go higher to the 4s, because that's your markup and that will allow you to price for wholesale. And then from there I add my labor. And now your labor is going to be really very individualized. So my labor is going to be more expensive than someone just starting out, and someone that's been doing it for 30 years is going to be way more expensive than mine. So figure out your own labor that you're comfortable with. And I put my hourly labor for however long it took me to do the piece, and then I add like a 10% overhead, charge. And obviously you want to include your packaging materials and all that jazz into everything. So this way, when you come up with your final number, it's covering all your costs. You might say, holy shit, this ring just went from like a $58 ring to a $120 ring, but that's how you're going to make money off of it. It is a business, and you want to think with a business like mine to get the numbers that you're looking for to really sustain a lifestyle, if that's what you're after. If you're doing it for a hobby, sure, you can charge whatever you want, but it actually in turn will hurt the community, because the people that charge a lot, people are like, what are you, fucking nuts? You're charging like $150 for a ring? Well, there's a lot of time that goes into that ring, and there's a lot of other things besides just making it that goes into a business. So, I can do more separate videos on like all of these topics really, but for right now I think that is a decent answer, and that will help you wholesale wise, because if you cut that number in half, you should still be able to afford making the product and selling it at wholesale if you're going to be doing bulk. If you're not doing a correct pricing formula, it does not have to be what I just said, but something similar or near it, then you're never going to make the kind of money you need to make for wholesale pricing. Oh, and step bezel. I don't really like step bezels. I don't like making them. One of my first rings, first couple of rings was a step bezel for a faceted stone. And I just don't like making them. I'd rather carve them in wax, because I like the end result better. So I essentially make a step bezel within my waxes. And I think I have a wax over here. Where'd it go? I had it somewhere. I don't know where it is right now.
Here is an example of a step bezel. Pretty much all it is 2 different bezels. One, the outside of the bezel is going to fit your stone, just like any other bezel that we create. So I have a 6mm stone, and I have it fit to that exact size, like we do with any other bezel. Then the second bezel is going to be the seat. It's going to be the inner bezel that will be soldered into the outside bezel, if that makes sense. So basically all you have to do is create something just a tiny bit smaller that can pretty much snap into place. And you want it to be nice and kind of a little, a little tension, so there's no real space between it. And then you would like to solder, like let's say your seam is right here on the outside. I try to do it on the opposite side for the inner seam. If the seam is here on the outside, I try to put the inner seam right here. And then I can do one of two things. You can also solder it again with hard solder. It should be fine if you can apply your heat correctly, but medium solder is what I generally do, because I'll apply a back plate or I'll put it on a ring shank or something like that. It helps some type of back plate. So then when I'm soldering this to wherever I want it to put it onto, that's when I put in the medium solder, and I just solder the inner to the outer. So if you just apply a very tiny
I just want to clarify now that I'm editing the video, it sounds a little confusing. So when you're doing the original solder seams for both of these separate bezels that I just showed, you want to solder them with hard solder like we would do with any other bezel. Then when you're putting them together, I like to keep the seams opposite, so like one's going to be on the north side and one's going to be on the south side. So then you clip it together, you just put one inside of the other, and then you can go ahead and solder with hard. But I would recommend doing it with medium so you don't undo any original solder seams. If that makes sense, I hope that helps and kind of clears any confusion up that you might have while watching the video.
Just apply a very tiny bit of solder to the inside seat right here, and then you apply a little heat. If you're applying it to a back plate, you're already going to be working with medium solder, so it'll just flow right in and it'll seal this up. And then, which will result, I already had this one done on my bench for quite a while. This one has an open back. And then if you took like a 6mm stone, you could just pop it in. So now as you can see, you have a perfect fit for a 6mm faceted stone, and you could just lower this height up a bit because you don't need that much space for this to comfortably sit into it. But that's pretty much how I make my step bezels, and the other way that I do them is by carving them out of wax. So as you can see where the seat is in the wax, and this is a round one, this is all casted. So it really just kind of depends on, you know, your skill set level and what you're willing to try out, but, you know, I would recommend taking a course if you want to wax carve. But as for the step bezels, they're not too hard. I hope that this was a good kind of short video for it.
So Kaylee Brewer asks, hello, I just came across your channel and I love your videos and jewelry you make. I was just wondering how you make a bezel setting for irregular shapes like sea glass, or like for sea glass. So it's really just a matter of taking the bezel wire and just kind of wrapping it around. You just wrap it around the stone and that's really it. I don't do anything special. You can get special like bezel forming stakes or mandrels that can help you kind of like hammer it around the bezel mandrels and take shape to maybe the particular irregular shaped item you're doing. But if it's very irregular, then your best bet is to get a pliable bezel wire and material like fine silver or copper, and you can just kind of twist it around, and I'll show you guys and I'll insert a clip.
Okay, so you really cannot see the perfection of this stone right now, but this is a surfite cab. I have really dark lighting right now because it's nighttime, but this is actually going to be in the giveaway video for my subscribers, along with some other stuff, but I just wanted to sneak peek it right now. Plus, I want to show irregular bezels and how to form them. So it's pretty much the same thing as any other shape. Doesn't matter if it's round or, you know, triangular or whatever. All you have to do is just wrap it around the stone. That's it. And once you wrap it around the stone, I usually just take like a Sharpie marker and I just mark where I need to cut. I would cut right there and I would file it in the same manner. Once you solder the bezel closed, you'll be able to shape it right back around the stone. And that's really it. It's nothing really more to it than that. If you find that you're having a problem keeping the original shape, I would really just recommend, you know, you can use like forming stakes. I know that I think Frets carries a lot of them, but I never really need to use a forming stake. Sometimes I'll use like, you know, different tools. Like sometimes you can even use your files if you have to. You gotta get creative, And you can use a hammer if you need to create a more of a pointed edge. I do that. I use my anvil sometimes if I need a certain edge that I can't get with just free-forming. So that's that. And then like here is a sea glass that I found on the beach, and it's almost shaped like a heart. And I made this little bezel for it. So it's just a matter of kind of like, you know, manipulating the wire so it goes where you want it to, and that's pretty much it.
So Gary Crow asks, love the videos and tips. Can you refer us to a good supplier of gemstones? We have bought several from Rio, but find their selection is somewhat limited. Our usual suppliers only handle B grade and below. Have looked online, but there are so many that it becomes mind-boggling, looking for A/AAA grade, but also prices and customer service. Thanks. You know, it's the one thing on my channel that I've told other people. I don't really share my suppliers. It's the one thing I'm kind of keep to myself, and I think most of you guys can understand why. I will be sharing more in the future because I'm going to be testing out some suppliers, and I'll share some, so you guys do have some good people to go to. As far as like the top grade quality stuff, you need to meet them at gem shows. That's really the only place I find like they're really nice, like diamond suppliers and stuff like that. You don't really know what you're buying online sometimes. So I have plenty of online suppliers and they're great, but I'm just saying that your best bet is to really find someone at a local gem fair. And a lot of the times I have to go actually see these people in order to place an order at a gem show, so I wait to buy from them. You know, I can go visit them in New York, but they have showrooms that I have to make appointments for. So, you know, sometimes they'll send you stuff and sometimes they won't, but it's hard for me because some of them don't even have contact like websites that you can buy from. You really have to go there and see it for yourself. New York has a lot of great shows, but so does everywhere else. You can go to Arizona for the gem show every year. You're gonna find like a lifetime worth of suppliers, and that's what you really have to do to acquire them. But Etsy is a great source. They have so many good suppliers, and they have a lot of great gemologists that work on there that sell and cut stones, but you have to really look into their background and read their about pages so you know what you're getting. You know, you could buy stones from India, not that they're bad, but you can get also a lot of dyed stones and a lot of fake stones or a lot of very cheapy quality stones. And then there are others that have fantastic qualities because most of the stones are cut outside of the US anyways. So that's really my best answer, but Etsy is a great, great tool. A lot of people ask me where to get stones. Go on Etsy, you will find everything you probably are looking for, whether it's cabochons, faceted stones, and there's a lot of wholesalers on there. So if you're really looking for like more personalized relationships face to face, you're gonna find those at gem shows. I hope that helps. All right, so Diana Williams asks, I love your videos and Instagram. Can you talk about working with and soldering gold? I've always wanted to try it. Again, Diana, I'm going to address this more in the new year because I don't solder gold often. It's not like I solder silver. I solder silver daily and a lot of it. I'll really try to touch base with that more in the coming new year where I'm working more with gold and we can talk more about the differences, and there's a lot of great articles out there too. Jewelry Making Daily, I think it is. I forget what it is, but I really recommend picking up like Lapidary Jewelry Magazine, or what's the other one? Art Jewelry Magazine. I have the Art Jewelry Magazine. That's the one I'm subscribed to. That one is fantastic. It has so many tips and tricks, and they'll go into different kind of metals. Until then, like I said, I don't work with gold that often. I use it more of for accent pieces, such as like bezels or like little detailing, as opposed to full-on gold pieces. Soldering silver, you need to heat the entire piece, whereas with gold is a little bit more direct for solder flow. So we'll touch upon that in the new year. Nishi, I love your vlogs, advice, reviews, etc. I do not have a Twitter account. I sent you a message a few days ago in regards to an oxidized finish on jewelry. How do you preserve the finish? And do you use LOS or Jax type colorants? Please advise. Many thanks. I'm a big fan in Canada. Regards. Thank you for watching. As far as LOS, liver of sulfur, I like liver of sulfur. I don't like Jax. I've used Jax in the past. I don't like it. What I will use Jax for, or I use right now the Midas Rio Grande Blackener. I don't mind using that for like small, like inside of the bezels if I want to darken just the inside of the bezel, or if I want to darken like a stamped piece, and then I'm going to polish over that to get the remainder off and just have it in the negative space. But I don't like using Jax or liquid types. Some people love them. I hate them. They're very flaky to me. The color turns more brown than black, and I clean my pieces. It's just, to me, I like LOS. I get a very consistent result. Obviously, it doesn't get black, it gets more gray-black. But then you can like brush things, you know, SOS pads or buffers, and you can kind of get different finishes from your LOS. But I really, really like regular liver of sulfur chunks. I find them to work the best. These are the ones that I use from Rio Grande, just the Midas liver of sulfur. I just love this stuff. It really, really works well. The can lasts forever. Just make sure you seal it. I was getting lazy with my last can and I was leaving it open. I had to replace the can way sooner than I would have needed to if I just took care of it. So liver of sulfur to me is just much more even. When I dip the pieces, I boil the hot water, I stick the piece of jewelry in, and it turns black within a minute. Rinse it off, and you can give it a baking soda bath afterwards, or you can brush it and do all sorts of fun, you know, effects to it. I don't use any type of like wax sealant though. Never cared for it. I just, you know, I let the piece go as it will. Like, you know, oxidizing it is one thing, but I don't rub additional like oils or what is that? I can't think of the name right now, but Renaissance wax. I don't use any of that stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. I just don't use it. I feel like the jewelry is going to take the wear eventually. The wax eventually wears. You know, a lacquer will wear. I really do like Protect-A-Clear. This is something that you can use on copper or after you finish a piece, like such as oxidizing it. And this stuff does work very well. But eventually I do notice it flakes. It wears pretty well. I've used it on some pieces. I've had no complaints. But like I said, it does flake. You know, it's not a foolproof method. You know, they do work, but the problem is that, you know, I used to work in the coating industry before I quit to do this full time. Coatings only last through so much, especially with something like wear like that every day. Eventually they peel, you know, eventually they fade with, you know, UV sunlight and things like that. So I just, I go au naturel when it comes to the Renaissance wax and stuff. Okay, Vibes Hawaii. I know this is very chatty. I hope you guys like it. I love all your videos. They are so informative. I was wondering how you recycle your scrap metal into those perfect circles for stamping.
Okay, so if you want to recycle your silver, I've shown this in vlogs, but I know that this was a question on the Q&A. You can simply just take a piece of your scrap metal. You can do this with pretty much any metal you choose to do. And you just take a flame and you literally apply the heat. And what's going to happen is this is going to create the silver to form into a ball. So as you can see right here, the silver is starting to heat up. It wants to melt into a ball. And I'll usually just like cut a little piece off like that. And there you go. And then you would just hammer that flat. And that's how you get those like little recycled flat details. So I'll show you when I hammer it out. But you can make these in all different sizes. And you really need a hot flame in order to do this for it to get to where you want it to be so it can ball up. And if you use like, see, these thinner pieces of metal are going to heat up much quicker. I'm making a barbell necklace actually with these, so I figured it'd be a good time to show it. Whoops. So you can just kind of, and you can keep, you know, redoing it till you get the shape and size you need, because sometimes they're not always perfectly flat. And I find that you can make like a little, you can burr out a little hole with a burr drill to get a perfect circle. But the other way that I like to get a really perfect circle is to reheat this onto my soldering pad. That always creates like a perfect circle each time. So I need a couple of balls right now, that's why I'm just kind of doing a bunch at once. Sometimes I'll come back on this soldering pad, and I like to usually do this when it's a little bit hot from the charcoal, because the charcoal really bounces the heat and reflects it back to the silver, whereas this takes a little more time for them to heat up. But for whatever reason, because this is super flat, when I heat these balls up, they really become perfectly round. Oh, there we go. These are all pretty round, so I'm gonna keep them, but that's another thing you can do if you're finding that you're having a hard time getting a flat shape. And it gives you a really nice flat bottom, so if you want to attach this to a back plate and add it with, you know, different designs for your rings or necklaces, you can do that. I've done a few rings with just ball detail, meaning recycling them myself, so not using beaded wire.
I'm running low on disk space, so if you wanted to make them flat from here, all you have to do is just pop them on a steel block and hammer them with a nice sturdy, I use my frets hammer, and I just hammer them flat, and then you're good to go to get that recycled flat look.
So Fletcher McDonald's asks, this is a very long question and kind of just, you know, suggestion. I'm going to try to read through it and pick apart the questions. So basically, you're asking, from what I gather, is that how do you go about selecting the correct gauges and ring shank sizes? I really go off of the stone. You know, if I'm working with like anything above like 25mm stones, I try to use like a 4 gauge or 2 gauge. I really like thicker gauges. I'd rather go for a thicker gauge than a thinner gauge. I really just put the shanks up against the back plates, because the back plates you can make. I always stick with the standard 20 gauge no matter what. I don't go thinner than that. I like more substantial pieces. 18 gauge is really lovely. 16 gauge is awesome too, but sometimes they become too heavy, especially if you're doing rings. You want to keep in mind how heavy they're going to be. If you're going to do earrings, I wouldn't recommend heavier gauge back plates because they're going to be too heavy on the ears. If they're like a small stone, then you can use 20 gauge, but you know, you can use like 22 gauge for a post earring if you want to. But 20 gauge is my go-to. I love 18. I have 18 and 20 gauge in stock always. As far as, you know, the ring shanks, you can always build your back plate first and then look at your back plate and just, you know, size up the ring shank to the back plate. Does this look right? Does this look normal? Does this look like it's too thin? I don't like, and I always shy away, and I tell customers, like sometimes people want a 10 gauge round band and they don't care if the stone is bigger. That's what they want. I will give them whatever they want if that's how they like their ring to fit. But it's all about balance, and sometimes it won't balance out the stone or the setting size. It really depends on look, and I think it's something that you get used to, but I always say go bigger if you can. Like, you know, go for a heavier gauge, go for a heavier ring shank, within reason. You know, you don't make it too thick, but it's always good to be on, I think, the more substantial side. You'll get a lot more wear out of it. It just looks more luxurious, but you don't want it to be uncomfortable. It's really just kind of a matter of testing what you like and what you're comfortable with. Some people love thin ring shanks, but like I don't like 16 gauge for anything. I don't know if I'll ever produce a 16 gauge ring shank unless it was in gold. It was just like a stacking ring, because 16 gauge, I do it in copper, I'm sorry, but that's like a very inexpensive material. It doesn't hold up. It gets disformed. So I'd say 14 gauge and above for like stacking rings and round bands. If you're going for like flat rectangular stock, I like 5 by 1.25 millimeters, or even 4 by 1.25 millimeters. That's generally my go-to. I don't like 1 millimeter thick shanks. They're just too thin. By the time I polish them out, they get even thinner. So I try to go 1.25 for like flat shanks and above. Stacking rings about 14 gauge. If I do like a 10 millimeter stone, you can get away with 12 gauge bands. You can get away with 10 gauge, round bands. You can hammer those out and give it a different look and kind of widen it out a bit. So there's a lot you can play with, but really you just have to test out what you think looks right. And you should write down when you feel like, oh, I made that ring and it just looked really, really chintzy, from what I wanted it to look like. You need to kind of say, all right, that was like a 35 millimeter stone. I used a 4 millimeter wide band. I need to up the ante because it's just not looking like it matches the overall quality that I'm looking for. I like thick. I don't mind it. I feel like it's durable. I know a lot of people that agree with me. I know some people who disagree with that. It's all personal preference, but at the end of the day, you want quality lasting jewelry, and if you use a really thin shank that's going to get all busted up and disformed, it doesn't make sense to even make the nice piece of jewelry because it's going to not last.
I just wanted to show you guys a couple examples of what I was talking about as far as sizing reference goes. Now, here is a 12 gauge band, which could work for any of these stones, really. For like a 10 millimeter, a 12 millimeter, I really don't generally go any bigger than that for 12 gauge unless it's requested. Or sometimes even 18 by 13 can work well on a 12 gauge hammered out, but I really don't like going thinner than that. Here's a 4 millimeter by 1.25 millimeter flat rectangular band. Now I wouldn't put this with a 5 millimeter stone. I think that's way too small, but this looks really nice with the 12 millimeter. Even the 8 millimeter is kind of tiny for that, unless I had some other stuff, more stones going on around it. Now, here is quite a large stone. I don't even know the measurements of this. Let's take a look. This one is 41 by 28 millimeters. This is a relatively thick ring shank, nicely weighted. This is 6 by 2.5 millimeters half round wire. I already have it formed. And this could work for this ring. It would still be nice and thick and weighted, but I still think by the time I would get done with putting the back plate on, this would be too top heavy and it would kind of be a little wonky. If it fits you perfectly, then it'd probably be okay, but I would prefer to probably make a thicker shank. That's when I would use a thicker shank and probably make one from scratch just out of sheet. This is 18 gauge sheet. So I could kind of make it as thick as I want it. I can detail the, the band, whatever have you. So it's really just a matter of trial and error. If you already have the stone in front of you, it's very easy to match up things and see what they look right with. If you don't have it in front of you and you're just designing and you're drawing out something, you just need to know your dimensions you're working with, because it's just about proportion. So I hope this kind of helps. I just want to quickly and briefly touch base on these questions.
Through time. I hope that answered your question. I know that it's kind of a tough one. I feel like all these are great topics for separate videos too. She also asked about mixed metal fabrications, which I kind of covered. Tips and pitfalls. It's tough. I think brass and silver are probably the hardest to combine together. We're not talking gold, but between brass, copper, and silver. I hate soldering brass to silver. And copper to silver, it gets so dirty so quick that you really need to protect the metal. I recommend using like a Firescoff or a my TFlux to solder with like brass and silver, because it gets dirty very quickly and doesn't allow it to heat up as much as it needs to solder to the silver. So it can get very dirty. Sometimes you waste a lot of material. I think I've gotten it down pat with the brass and copper on silver when I want to do mixed metals, that it works out pretty well. But you'll notice it's just not as smooth and buttery. If you can solder like copper and you can solder brass, you can solder anything, because they're a pain in the ass, especially when put them all together. All right, Terry Matheson.
So this is actually a Firescoff bottle, which I absolutely love, but I actually have my TFlux in it because I ran out of Firescoff and I really like a spray bottle. But this is what my TFlux looks like. You can get it at Rio Grande. You can also get Firescoff at Rio Grande. These are both really great for mixed metal applications if you want to use it as a protective barrier to make soldering flowing much easier. I will go more into this in the My TFlux video, but Firescoff works very well, but I find My TFlux works very similar and you get a lot more for the price, so you can give that a go. And I will again talk about this in another video, but I just wanted to show that on camera now.
Would love your opinion on the torch you prefer. I love acetylene. I learned on acetylene. That's all I know. I couldn't even give you an opinion. I do know that like propane and oxygen, they burn cleaner. I know that you can achieve a much finer flame. You have a little bit more playroom if you work with like really fine materials like gold rings and you do a lot of prong setting. You're going to probably want to get a torch that accommodates that. I do a little bit more bigger work, so acetylene is great because you can burn that bitch up. I mean, you can really have a big bushy ass flame if you want to do large cuffs. If you're doing finer, smaller work, then I don't know if you'd want acetylene because it doesn't achieve a very, very fine flame. The finest flame I think you can get is a 00 tip, and I use that all the time, and it definitely does me great. I can solder chain with it, but you got to be really conscious, and like I would definitely look into what people say and what kind of torches will deliver what. I also like that an acetylene B tank is one tank system. It mixes with atmospheric air, and you don't have to refill two different tanks. You just have one, so that's a benefit to that. Nicole H, I love to watch you work on your projects, and I've learned so much from your vlogs. Your photos are fantastic, and the detail is so crisp. What kind of camera do you use? Do you only shoot in natural light? So my camera that I'm filming on is the camera that I use for my photographs as well. It's a Nikon D5200. I got the stock lens, which is like you can buy it in a bundle, and pretty much everybody buys like an 18 to 55 millimeter lens. That's what I got. I didn't get a macro lens or any special lenses, just that one. And it was an investment. I had my first camera for 4 years, and then I upgraded to the D5200. It is a fantastic camera. It is worth every penny of it. It's more expensive, but it's worth it. I use it every day for so many different things. It's not great for filming because as you can see, you can hear the shutter noise when it refocuses. Nikons aren't really built, at least this model, to film as well as like a Canon, which you don't hear that focusing sound. So maybe down the line later, if I continue to do YouTube, I'll get a better camera for that. But this camera is crisp. I use the manual setting. I don't use auto. I did take a class to use the camera, which helped. You know, a lot of it self-learned again, you know, self-taught, you could say. But it is a fantastic camera, but I do shoot in only natural light. I don't shoot indoors. I shoot outdoors even if it's snowing. I just like the way it looks outside. I just like the whole atmosphere of the picture. Just like, or what could I say? The whole feel of the picture that I get from being outside. It just has a completely different vibe than doing indoor shooting for me. But you can do indoor shooting towards like a window, and you know, if you have a nice setup. I don't really have good lighting anywhere to do that, so I don't. But yeah, I love the camera. So these were a few Twitter questions. Stephen Brown, I think, says, metalsmithing is completely foreign to me, but I'm looking for a new serious hobby, just wondering how to get started. I'm going to link my video below with my tools and stuff. Really, I think your best bet is to take a cheap class. I know I say the same things over, maybe this video is very repetitive, but taking a class is great. Read some articles. Do like those really easy, like how to make a simple stacking ring. You need minimal tools. You can do flux, solder, a little mini butane torch, you know, a little charcoal block, you know, little pickle pot, and a tumbler, and you can make a ring. So I would start with very basic projects, even if it's riveting. Like, try easy projects that require minimal tools and see how you like it before you kind of dive in completely and, you know, spend a lot of money on it. But if you're looking for a new serious hobby and you're really serious about it, just take a quick class. Something that's not like, you know, once a week. You can go in, kind of learn the basics, and see if you really want to progress into doing it all the time. it's really a fantastic thing to start, as many of you I'm sure agree. Next one is from Cypress Studios, Jean Kuhn. This is on Instagram. Have a question. I know you've done a vlog on your average day, but I'm curious as to how many pieces you get done in an average week. Every single one varies. I always do over about 20 pieces, I would say, no matter what, consistently. But it really does vary. Sometimes I can't get out that many. Sometimes I can only do 10 or 15, you know. But like for the most part, I'm always making a lot, whether it's for fulfilling orders or making new product for my shop. Just about 20 or sometimes just under 20, but it just depends on my order flow. Some pieces are just a lot bigger and they're more expensive and they take more time, and then I do a lot of stacking rings, so it really, really depends and varies. But I'm always pretty much busy. You know, I have slow weeks, but you know, I always have orders coming in or requests coming in, or I'm working on new product to fulfill for my shop, or fill up my shop, I should say. So I'd like to maybe, you know, get a better answer for you. I'd really have to calculate, because I kind of just go with it and I just kind of make and I kind of do. But that's pretty much what I do in an average week. Okay, TLMCPA says, curious what kind of torch setup you use. I just found you I really enjoy your vlog. I just answered that one, so I can skip that. Okay. And the last question I'm going to address is desert torch designs. This might sound strange, but I would enjoy seeing how your studio is organized, especially your bench drawers. I'm amazed at how you can go right to the tool you need, whereas my tools get scattered all over and I try it as I might. They never seem to be where I need them to be. I never seem to get organized very well. Pliers, files, drill, burrs, etc. All of that will be a big help. I will do that in my studio tour when I get around to it. I don't know when I will. It'll be soon, probably right after the new year. I'll get to that video. I will after, my studio is messy. Like, you know, you could see I have like paper towels from cleaning off jewelry and just like, you know, pliers and shit everywhere. But everything does have a place. And I would like to show you guys that's this way. You know, I'm not like super hyper organized person. I think everybody's different. Some of my friends have gorgeous studios, painted walls, decorated. I'm not like that. Things get messy and I work through that and I clean it, and then I, you know, consistently repeat that process. I do have a process. I do have a place for stuff though, and I would love to show you guys that to better help you. I know this was really chatty. I hope this helped. I know it wasn't a super informative, hands-on vlog. It was more of just kind of a Q&A. But if you guys would like me to do more videos like this, I will try to space them out because I think a lot of questions will probably repeat. Please let me know. Thank you so much for all your support, and I have some more like actual really in-depth videos coming up next, which is the vlog and the TFlux that I think you guys will really like. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.